Well, hello everyone again, and welcome to our wonderful partnership professional development on the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy, their new digital literacy guide. This is really a kind of a training for the trainers, those of you that work with volunteers, and sharing a resource with you that we were introduced to some months ago. And I'm grateful that we have Pam Coate here with us. She is the Senior Director of Curriculum and Training for the Barbara Bush Foundation. Um, I'll turn things over to her in a minute, but I wanted to introduce myself for those of you who may be new on the call. I'm Patrick Brown. I'm the director of our adult education association called MACAE. We have some of you from Michigan, and then maybe some of you that are coming from Chicago area as well. So I'm just really happy that you were able to join us this afternoon. We may have some more folks popping in, and certainly we will get them caught up to speed as they come in this afternoon. For those of you in Michigan, if you need continuing education hours for a teacher certification or a degree, you can fill out this form that I've just put into the chat form by putting in your information. And I will quickly just share my screen and show you the form. So the form asks you for your email, your name, your personal identification code. That is the personal identification code if you have a educator certificate or a teaching credential that you have. If you don't identify that or know what that is, you may not need sketches, but otherwise we can help you locate that if you're not sure what that is. And then in the drop-down menu, you would want to go down here and click on the last one, our Barbara Bush Foundation Digital Literacy Professional Development for today, and click Submit, and we will do our best to upload that within the coming days. So again, if you need professional sketches or continuing education hours, I am going to put that link into the chat. Any questions before we start? No? All right, well, with that, I will turn it over to our wonderful presenter, Pam Coate from the Barbara Bush Foundation. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Patrick, for that. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so exciting to be here with you today. I want to start out by saying that while we're located in DC and I live in Maine now and I'm a remote worker, I am a Midwesterner and I grew up in Wisconsin, not too far from you. So I always like to meet people in the field in that region. So it's great to be here this afternoon. I do work on the programs team, and just to share a little bit about myself, I was a teacher for several years and I taught upper elementary through adult learners. Spent about 6 years teaching reading and writing to adult learners and also managing a family literacy program. And now at the foundation, I focus on projects that are designed for adult learners, adult educators, and also for family literacy programs. And so that's the material we're going to be sharing today. But I want to turn it over to my colleague, Andrea, who's going to join us just for a little bit. She helps me manage the chat, and if things go haywire with the technology, she jumps in to support the conversation. So Andrea, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Andrea Maloney-Kitts and I am on the programs team at the Barbara Bush Foundation. Like Pam said, I kind of just help facilitate the chat. If there's any issues or questions, just feel free to drop them in there and then I can flag and let Pam know. I'll also be dropping some links in the chat so you guys can be able to click along and follow along with Pam.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for having your camera on. I do request that for these trainings because they are interactive and we will be having some small and whole group conversations. I do want to tell you, ironically, I might have to turn my camera off a couple times. I was telling Patrick, I did something and I pinched a nerve. We've all been there, right? And so I'm moving very stiffly, but I didn't want to cancel this training because I knew you were all coming in and you would be forgiving of that if I had to turn my camera off and stand up to get us through the training. So I'm going to share my screen, and while I'm doing that, it would be great if in the chat you could pop your name, your role in supporting adult learners, and also any experience you have teaching digital literacy skills, which can be very brief. I realize this is just in the chat. So your name, how you work with adult learners, whether it's directly or you oversee a program or you train tutors, and then your experience teaching digital skills. And then I'm going to pull up our deck and just give you some background information and also take us through the materials. Let me do that. Hopefully you can all see my screen okay. I'm also on a new Mac, so testing it out. This is my first training with my new computer. So I always like to start out just by setting the lens for this, and Patrick did that, and that's great that this is really a train the trainer. So we have documents to support full trainings that people who work in training mentors or volunteers or new tutors or are responsible for professional development at sites to use to share our very large, it's like over 75 pages of research insights on digital literacy, and to really use that guide as a tool. So this is not necessarily a training where we're digging into every training module. It's more that I'm going to provide an overview of 3 documents that work together. And I will do the majority of that after I do a little showcase of 2 of those documents. We will be right in the training deck that is free that you would use. That's what you're viewing right now. And we'll do some activities straight from this so you can get a little taste for what the training is about. And then at the end and throughout, I'll be able to answer any questions. We're a small group, but at the end, we can also talk about if you think for your site, you might like some more support and what that might look like from the Barbara Bush Foundation. We're happy to have that conversation. So with that, are there any questions before I jump in? I'm going to try to change my, let's kind of scroll through, because now that I'm sharing, I can't see everyone. So Andrew, just let me know if anything pops up, as always. Okay, so why are we here? Why are we talking about digital literacy, and why did the Barbara Bush Foundation collaborate and work to co-develop and co-design this with Digital Promise? We know how important digital literacy skills are, the development and the building and expansion of those skills, particularly for adult learners. When we think about social mobility, we think about employment, health literacy, all these different things that come together for adult learners. And then we all, I'm sure, have an understanding of how quickly technology changes. You know, you just think you learn how to do something, and then there's something else new you have to learn how to do. So a couple of years ago, the Barbara Bush Foundation did a landscape scan on digital health and financial literacy. Excuse me. And we decided to focus on digital literacy first. And we were looking for a gap in the field and a way to specifically support all of you adult educators. And one of the gaps that came out is, while there is a lot of information on working with adult learners, and it's based in adult learning theory, there didn't seem to be a guide or support in the context of digital literacy. So the resource guide that I'm going to share with you is specifically geared to that. And so when we do the training, our training objectives are specifically on these 3 things. So if you choose to use this to train staff or tutors, you could be assured then that the materials would cover key concepts on teaching digital literacy, learner variability. There's a really fabulous tool I'm going to show you. It's a Digital Promise tool that you're going to love. It also works on increasing confidence and ability to identify adult learners' digital literacy needs and goals. And I would say needs and goals in general. We do dig into that a little bit, the key considerations of working with adult learners. And then the third one is navigating the resource guide, which is a very hefty resource. And so we want to talk with you about that so you become comfortable using it. And then the other thing, just to share, is an overall session agenda. So we're not going through all of this today, but I'm showing you what our training covers. And I'll share with you that Andrea and I have been doing a lot of trainings over the past 5 months, because we launched the guide last April at COABE. So April 2022, and we went into a usability study with it in October and finished training sites in March. So we have actually done several train the trainers, but we've also done several full trainings over Zoom with sites. And usually if you're looking at this agenda, each training module matches a chapter in the resource guide. And Andrea, can you drop the resource guide if you haven't yet? I'm going to show that to them next. Thank you. And we have done it all different ways, but typically what we do is we meet with a group, and you could do your training this way too. And we would offer training through module 3 for one session, which takes about 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then session 4 through session planning is a couple hours. But we've done all sorts of models with this, which is why it's great. It's so versatile, it's flexible for your needs. And we'll explore that a little bit at the end of this. And I think you're going to give you a little whiplash in this train the trainer, because what I have to do is I have to jump around resources. So bear with me. So we're going to leave the training deck right now, and we're going to actually go into the digital guide. Bear with me while I bring us up. We just dropped this link. I'm hoping that, oops, hold on. Sorry about that. Again, a little whiplash. I'm hoping you've seen this, but if you haven't seen it, no worries at all. As I said, the resource guide came out last April, and the start of the guide is acknowledgments and a lot of information about the guide. And then on page 4, we show how the content is organized. So the content of the resource guide is organized over 5 chapters. We do have a section of additional resources, and then we have a very long appendix section. And I'm going to show you a few of the early chapters, just so you can see some of the key features. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the training deck at some point, and we're going to explore the chapters with the training deck and doing some activities. So this is all interactive. I could click on these and I could go straight to the chapter, although sometimes when I'm presenting in Zoom, it doesn't let me do that. But you can see in chapter 1, we explore some definitions, specifically around digital literacy and digital resilience. And what I always like to do when I talk about this is talk about the activities that are in the training and the opportunities you have to make it your own. So I want to acknowledge that you could be looking at some of the definitions we've put in the book, and we've talked about how technology changes. And some pieces might resonate with you, some pieces you might word a different way or share a different way with your learners or in your group. All of that is built into the training, so you can have very open conversations and explore definitions that work best for you in your program. So what I want to show you in here is some of the key features. So the first key feature in the resource guide is a pause and reflect. And you'll see these pause and reflects at the end of each chapter. And sometimes we've placed them in the middle of a chapter if the chapter is quite long. And it's exactly what it says. It's an opportunity for you to pause and to reflect on what you've read, and then we offer a suggestion of how you could interact with it. And so this first one on page 8 is great because it lets you set your own goal for interacting with the guide, and it directs people to review the table of contents, and it recognizes that you could be using this resource guide as a very seasoned teacher. You feel you're very strong, for example, in adult learning theory, and you might want to skim that chapter and focus specifically on the chapters around digital literacy. Or you might be working with a new teacher or a new tutor, or want to brush up on some of these things, and you decide that you're going to read through the guide from start to finish. So again, the pause and reflects are there to support how you interact with the guide. In chapter 2, you're introduced to another key feature, and that is on, oops, sorry. I was telling Patrick that along with my new computer, I have a new mouse, and it moves very quickly. So sorry if I flip past some pages and have to go back. On page 12, you see another key feature, which is called a quick tip. So any of you who have worked on a project like this where you're writing a guide and it's linked to adult learning theory or a document, you know, as teachers, we like to really dig into the theory, right? We can really go down paths of sharing a lot of information. So what we try to do is go back into the guide and really look in those chapters and the theory pieces and pull out quick tips so that you could quickly interact. So this is a perfect example. This section right here, which starts on page 8, is on learner variability and a whole learner approach, and we're going to talk about that. And the quick tip highlights specifically an idea of how you can be culturally responsive in your teaching. And this quick tip is about how to get to know your learners' names, how to pronounce them correctly. And then you will always have links either to within the guide, to a deeper resource, or outside of the guide for something that will support that. And then the last key feature I want to show you, which is really crucial to the guide, is this linking theory to practice. The linking theory to practice are truly what it says. We've pulled the theory from the section, from the page, from the chapter, and have thought, how can we put this into practical terms? What can we create that you could use right away or tweak a little bit if you wanted to with your learners? What could you print from it? And so this, I don't know if it's going to let me do this in here. If not, I'm going to have to give you whiplash, but yeah, I'm in full presentation mode in Zoom, so it won't. But so I'm going to give you a really quick scroll through. Sorry about that. But if I were to click on that first linking theory to practice, it would bring me to page 58, which kicks off our appendix. And you might have seen me skim by this multi-Venn diagram earlier in the guide, but it gives you a specific resource to use. And so when you're exploring the guide, I really want to point out that you use the appendix. So for example, this circle here in this multi-Venn diagram is on cognition. And we took those 4 circles, for example, and using color coding, expanded them here. So here's cognition, and gave a lot of tips. You can see there's all these extra resources in here. And then in addition to that, we created some assessments. We're going to specifically talk about this one in the training. And then we even have some resources that were supplied directly from North Star Digital Literacy. So I don't know if you work with North Star or how you pull in your digital literacy work with your students. I'm sure it's integrated into lessons and whatnot. But North Star actually, someone that works on that team helped with the quick tips and the theory of practice. So as a result of that, some of these printable activities that you see in here are straight from the curriculum. Okay. So that was a quick little taste of the resource guide. Again, we're hoping that you saw it before you came to the training, but if not, once you review it, we can answer any questions on it. The other document that I want to share with you before we go back to the training, and just bear with me because my Zoom bar is in the way, is right here, and it is the facilitator training handbook. So there's three resources we're talking about today. The resource guide, which is the anchor, and then built off of that, the training material. And we started with that deck. But there's this kind of extra document, not extra, but it's the document that if you are going to conduct the training will be very important to you, because it's really the curriculum of the training. It's the scope and sequence of the training. And so it provides an overview of the guide, and then it provides tips, which if you do training a lot or you're working with tutors or mentors, you might be familiar with, developing learning objectives, and the different training materials, and, how important it is to do icebreakers and things like that. But then it takes each chapter, and chapter 1 would equal module 1 in the training. And it breaks the module apart to say, when you talk about chapter 1, when you're training on chapter 1 or having a conversation with it, here are the learning objectives you might want to cover. Here are the key terms. And here are specific activities you can do. And we give a lot of activities for each module. We don't expect you to do all of them, but we give a lot so that you can go through and you can pick and choose and customize what works best. I'll give you an example of that with chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a really lengthy chapter in the guide. It's specifically on learner variability and the whole learner framework and the adult learner experience. And that's where you get to view a digital promise tool. And so when you're in that section, you'll see of this training handbook, you'll see that it goes on quite a bit because there's a pop-out section specifically on learner variability, but then we also give additional optional activities. So my whole point in this is there's something for everyone. And what I really like about the training handbook, where I taught, we would have professional development throughout the year. And a lot of times what would happen is we would take something like this resource guide and we would engage in it and break it apart over several meetings. And so if you are joining us today and you plan out professional development at your program, this facilitator training handbook will be useful because you could have a meeting just on module 1, just on chapter 1 for people to explore, and then a second meeting just on that and break it over if you meet monthly or whatever you do. And then I'm going to scroll through. You can see that they all follow the same plan. And I just want to get to the very end of this because the other piece that we have in here is some tips and tricks around planning your first session. And for those of you who work specifically with tutors and volunteers, this is really who it was designed for. We also work with groups that are corporate volunteers that don't have the background you have in training tutors and what is going to a first tutoring or mentoring session look like. So this is pretty explicit. And I'm sure if you already have a program, you already have structured how you interact with your tutors, but there might be something here that is useful that you could pull from. So we have information on planning your first session where we kind of walk you through with some information. Let me get to it right here. And then we have components of an effective session. So we have populated this with resources linked to North Star Digital Literacy, free resources, and then other digital resources that are out there in the adult ed space. And then we also go so far as we have the sample first session, and then we have a blank template. So those are just some extra resources. So this is the last time we're going to jump. We're going to jump back to our training. And I want to just take a pause and see, and I might say, if you might ask a question, I'm going to ask you, if you have any questions, you might ask a question where my response is, oh, hold on, I'm going to get to that. But I just gave you a lot of information. I've shown you 2 out of 3 resources of our training materials. And so I want to pause and just see if there's any questions so far on those. Scroll through so I can check in with everyone. I just have to say, I love how you all have your cameras on because that's not always the case when we train. So thank you so much for doing that and being present in this. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to keep going and we are going to get into the training material and do some activities together. It won't just be a sit and get now. So this training deck that you're seeing, as I said, is the training deck that comes to you. And so it's the full training. And so as I share it with you in train the trainer mode, I will be sliding through some slides quickly, not stopping on them, just so we can hit the points that we're going to explore together. There is a second deck that has all the talking points in them. And so the great exciting news is it's all free, and we're going to send everything to Patrick when we close today, and then he can send it off to you. So I thought we would take a pause of just sitting and listening, and we're going to like to do a quick activity with you to kind of set the stage. And any activity I do with you today is an activity that we move. I'm sorry, I'm having the Zoom bar will not move. I don't know if it's in the way of you guys seeing it, but it will not move off my training screen. So, okay, we'll just leave it. Sorry about that. We're going to talk about what's on this slide through a Mentimeter. And if you haven't done one before, we're going to walk you through it. But what I started to say before I tried to deal with my own technology and show some digital resilience is that every activity we do with you today is an activity in the training material. So you'll get to experience that. So what we'd like to have you do, Andrea is going to drop a link to the Menti code in the chat. And I'm going to try and bring the chat over, and I see we have some questions, and so I'll pause and answer some of those questions after. And the question that we want to explore with you is, when you think about adult learners, what digital literacy skills do adult learners need? And I'm going to pop out of this. I'm going to go to the Menti and present. We have the QR code here. This is new with Menti. I have no idea why the question's in the middle of the screen. I went to set this up last night, and I don't know if they've updated their technology and like it better that way. Please enter to show answers. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry. I think Menti's gone through an update. Navigating multiple screens. So again, you can click on the link if that's not working. There's the QR code, and then there's the code at the top. Practical skills they need for their life. Yeah, I love how that's connected straight to their goals or their life. It's always different, such important conversations to have. I think I set it up where you can keep adding, so feel free to keep adding. And I quickly scan through who everyone is. I didn't get to do that before. Lots of great experience in the room. That's wonderful. How to be safe on the internet, social media. That's so important, you know, knowing if they have a question, how do you look up the information? How do you check the source? How do you synthesize that information, especially if you have lower literacy? That can be a challenge. Basic, keyboarding, troubleshooting, how to buy a laptop, digital literacy vocabulary. One thing I don't think I've seen in here yet is thinking about how digital literacy interconnects with all different types of literacies. You know, when you think about health literacy and you need to get on a health portal, or financial literacy, you want to look at your online banking information. So good. So I'm going to pop out of this. This is all really good information, and you can see that that's one activity that we do. And if you are engaging in the training in person, there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. You don't have to use the Mentimeter, but that is the way you can do it. So let's continue through this section right here. So module 1 of the training, you're going to see right away how this matches chapter 1 in the guide that I just showed you. And it specifically gets into how to use the resource guide. So one of the things I always emphasize is bullet number 2, that the resource guide is not digital literacy curriculum. We don't pretend it's curriculum. It is definitely not. It is a resource to support you working in a digital literacy context. Now, that said, there are many sites that don't use a specific digital literacy curriculum. You don't have, a subscription, or there are a lot of sites that take a very integrated and contextualized learning approach to digital literacy. And so they are recognizing that those tasks are happening right in the classroom. So I point that out because if you are someone who's strong in digital literacy and also strong in putting together a scope and sequence for some lessons, you definitely could do that using the resource guide. And if anyone's thinking of doing that, I'm happy to chat another time to talk about how you might be able to do that. So again, this is chapter 1, very much the overview. There's lots of activities, as I said, about the definitions. And then another activity, we're not going to do this right now because we've set this up as a train the trainer. We just don't have the time to hit every activity. But we do have a conversation about how people are digitally resilient. And so just take a moment and reflect. And you can use that reflection as we have these conversations. What we like to do and what we normally do here is have people either have a conversation or put in the chat about what you've done so far today that has required digital literacy skills. So is it turning off a phone or making coffee or responding to an email? So think about that. And then also, what challenges have you faced with digital literacy today? We can all think that, we're very strong in digital literacy, but little things can throw us off with that. So that is another topic that we explore. And that's the activity right there. Okay, so we're going to move ahead and we're going to talk about chapter 2, module 2. And we're going to do an activity from this chapter that we do in training. So this is one of my favorite chapters. And when we first put this chapter together, in my head, I was really thinking, well, someone who has experience working with adult learners we'll probably skim this chapter and pull out a couple little things. But what I have found in the training is no matter what your level of experience is, this chapter has really resonated with people. And so when you are doing the training, even if you're doing training, professional development training to staff, I encourage you to really go into that training handbook and look at the slides that have the talking points and really dig into this section and do some of the activities around it. So it focuses on learner variability, which we're going to talk about, explores digital equity a little bit, and it also talks about key concepts for a whole learner. And one of the things that we use in this chapter to set the stage is we really dig into the conversation about digital literacy needs at work. So we have the statistic of nearly 1 out of 3 Americans currently struggles to perform their job effectively due to limited digital problem-solving skills. I'm not sure if anyone saw the National Skills Coalition report that came out recently that's of the skills that they surveyed, 92% of those jobs required some type of digital literacy skill. And they were able to link that directly to job mobility and to income that someone was earning. It's really fascinating. So if a job requires one digital skill, they were able to equate that to money and what someone might earn. And I don't have the link. I usually have the link. So if you haven't, Patrick, are you familiar with that report that came out? Okay, perfect. Because I always like to share that, but maybe we can share that after for people who haven't seen it. And then you have an opportunity to talk about digital equity. This is a really great conversation to have when you are doing a training, because you have an opportunity to say to people, what is your definition? And we usually ask them to put it in a chat. And then we share the one in the guide. And we're able to have a conversation about what is similar, what is different, what would you change? Because we know also in working with adult learners, it's always so important to keep the conversation open to all different ideas and beliefs. So I'm going to scroll ahead and specifically talk about learner variability and then give you a chance to do an activity on that. So learner variability is the recognition that we all have a unique set of skills and that they're interconnected and that there's no average learner. So if you look at the graphic we have here, it specifically talks about how someone could, have very strong working memory, but might struggle with self-regulation. And then learner variability also talks about how it's not just about cognition, but it's also about the social emotional part. And so, for example, we know that if you're not getting the sleep you need, it could affect your working memory and possibly your motivation. And so it's something that, I'm going to go to the next slide here. Oops, I thought I'm going to flip ahead here for a second. This chart, this multi-Venn diagram that I actually highlighted in the guide and is in the guide, is a great reflection piece. And so we're going to do this activity, and I'm going to show you a tool. I'm going to show you the tool before we go into this activity though. So, and I have to pop out to do this. I know I said I was going to be doing this a lot. Digital Promise has this adult learner factor tool, and it takes in adult literacies, cognition, social emotional learning, and learner background. And we're going to drop the link for this tool for you, because I want you to have it, and you're going to love this, and you're going to want to bookmark it, and you are going to use it. I would have been using this as a teacher. So it takes these factors and some of the things that I just talked about with learner variability, and it allows you to hover over one. So let's say I'm going to hover over sleep. I'm working with a learner who is not getting enough sleep. They're up with children, they're a caregiver of a relative, they work second or third shift, and I want to really understand how that could be impacting them. So when I hover over sleep, you'll see how the diagram changes, and every factor that's connected with sleep becomes highlighted. And I can do that if I know that I need to work with someone, for example, around foundational reading skills. I can see the other connections. And then I can actually click on each one of those. And I come to a page which is full of research-based insights, evidence-based strategies, specifically on, for this one, foundational reading skills, linking out to other information. And then one of my favorite things in here is at the very bottom of each one of those is this section on research-based strategies for this factor. So if I want to do something with foundational reading skills, which is something I might have done as a reading teacher, and I know that chunking is an important as a strategy, which is a strategy I used to use, I could click on that, and then it brings me to a page specifically on chunking with information. But what's so exciting is, look at the bottom. There are 4 resources to go with this, either resources that can be used directly in the classroom or resources that support you learning more. Another great example, annotating has a lot. So I can scroll to the bottom of annotating. So this tool that I'm showing you, when you do the training, you give people time to actually read through it and really explore. And I would encourage you to do that on your own as well. Again, this is a train the trainer, so we're not going to go into great detail on that. But what we are going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to do this activity. And let me just check on the time. We have until 3:15 or 3:30, Patrick. 3:30? Okay, perfect. Okay. So
Yeah, sorry, 3:30. I was looking at the digital guide, so I had to switch back to my my
that's
screen.
okay. That's
Awesome
okay, no
tool.
problem.
Yep, 3:30.
So what I'd like you all to do is reflect on yourself as a learner, and think about, what are your strengths, what are your challenges, recent success you had. We're all still learners. And Andrea is going to pop in the chat a couple questions, 3 questions. One is, what factors impact your learning as strengths or challenges? So specific to you. So if you look at literacies, one of the questions is, do you feel comfortable using a computer and navigating the internet? If you look at background, did you get 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep? How are you getting the sleep that you need? And then also think about, the second question to think about is, what strategies do you use when learning on your own? And then how does context, so here we are learning virtually, how does context of the learning affect the factors and strategies that show up for you? At this point, do you do okay with virtual learning, or is it still difficult? Usually when we do the train the trainer, we always have people say, well, it's kind of hard because you're jumping between different documents, and I have a hard time with that. And I do better having everything in front of me. So I'm going to be quiet so you can do this. And then we're going to actually, because we're a smaller group, after you reflect, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you. And I'm going to ask for 2 or 3 brave souls to share what they notice about themselves. So any questions before you pop into this self-reflection?
Pam, just a flag, there was a question in the chat earlier.
Oh, okay.
Just about kind of how long a training would take for a volunteer from start to finish, but you can answer.
Okay, perfect. So let's do this activity and then Andrew, remind me when we close this and we'll answer that question. Okay. So I'm going to mute. I'm going to leave this screen up, but I'm going to mute and I'm going to give you, it's 2:42. We're going to go to 2:46. I'm going to give you 4 minutes, quick brainstorm reflection. Okay, take about 30 seconds to finish your thoughts. If you want to continue to look at the Venn diagram, I'm going to stop sharing right now. That is in the guide on page, so there's my timer. I'm gonna pull it up as well. Page 14 is where it's in the guide. And so I'll kick it off and share, and then maybe that will make some people comfortable doing that. But so I would say for learner variability, for me, when I think about challenges, I've actually have adapted to virtual trainings. However, I will say I am an antsy learner. I'm one of those bad students, and if I don't have my camera on, I stray. I don't intentionally do it, but I really need to be present in the moment. And then another thing to think about for me is the question about multitasking or quickly switching between tasks. That's always been a strength of mine, but what I have noticed now that I work at home and I am so much on Zoom, and we actually talk about this in the guide, the challenges of doing that and kind of what that switching technology to technology and task to task that way really does affect your brain and how it processes. And so I read that in the guide, and I have tried to be better about structuring my time so I'm not kind of jumping around. So that's just an example of a reflection you might have. It might not be similar at all, but hoping at least one or two people would be willing to share their reflection. Karen, go right ahead. Thank you.
I'll share. Sure. Similar to you, Pam, I think I don't get enough sleep. I have a plate full with my job, and I think it's all about, just that digital. I have Zoom after Zoom after Zoom, or I might be triple or double booked with Zoom, trying to get in and out. How can I have someone cover for me? And I still have all the work that I have to do. And I think that sometimes that technology, the ease of now having back-to-back Zoom meetings makes it really difficult for us to take time to even, reflect what just happened, what the meeting is, what hat I have to wear as I step into another meeting, and am I prepared for the meeting? And so like today I started at, 9 o'clock, and I'll be meeting until, and I have class until 8 o'clock tonight. And it just hasn't stopped. So once I'm done with this, I have another meeting and I have another meeting. And so, I think that that's been a challenge. And I think it onset with just, for me, not getting enough sleep, and then that adds on as another stressor. And I also want to say that, for digital literacy wise too, I just was texting Patrick because that beautiful article from NSC, I was like, oh, I need that because I have a committee and I want to share that article. And then I was like, well, how do I download that? And he was like, you just have to click on here, and I was like, I got it. And so knowing how to get, help when you need it too, I think is really critical.
Yeah, that's a great share. I think we can all really relate to the back-to-back meetings. We've tried to implement at the foundation, and we're not always great about it, but ending our meetings at the 25 or the 50 and really allowing for that transition time. Just a little tip, we implemented that. Thank you so much. Allison.
Hi. So I'm really good at being focused. I'm pretty good at taking care of myself. I have lots of strategies of how I keep track of stuff and the way that I transition, but I'm an extrovert. And I want to talk to every one of you. I want to talk to Vicki about what's going on at Adrian, Ray, and Karen. I haven't seen you, I think, since the last pro-literacy thing. And I want to talk so that's what's hard for me about the digital or the Zoom meetings and things, is I don't have that same time to check in and find out about other programs and that I so much love and relish about these opportunities. So that's where the digital learning can be really hard for me. But otherwise, strategy and self-care and stuff, I do okay. But the extrovert in me struggles.
Great reflection. Thank you for that. One more person want to close it out? I don't want to not include anyone if they wanted to share, but no pressure. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Ruthie.
I'll share, just because I'm kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, that I am never on a Zoom meeting. So everything I do is in person. This is actually really rare for me. So I'm kind of like, wow, those screens are going by really fast.
Yeah.
But as far as the weaknesses, especially that I have, is that I know personally by the end of the day, my brain is not working. So anything that's going to be challenging, I schedule for first thing in the morning. If I do have something coming up, 7 or 8 o'clock at night that I've got to be sharp for, I know now to be much better prepared for it than I would have to be if it was at 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's mine.
I can relate to that. I had a intense meeting yesterday at 4 o'clock, and I was like, oh, I would have been doing so much better if this was at 9 o'clock versus the end of my day trying to concentrate. So I really appreciate the reflection. And this is something, you've reflected on yourself. So think about how you could use this to develop rapport with your learners, how you could use what you know about yourself as a learner to support them as learners, or for when you're teaching your mentors or your tutors. So that's an example of an activity that we're able to dig into a little bit more. And I'm going to pull something else. I was going to do, it's not going to work for me now. I was going to do an activity with you, but I'm looking at the time and we're not going to have time. So bear with me because we're going to sort of do it, but I got to pull it up a different way. So while I'm doing that, I want to answer the question about how long overall does the training take? Is that correct? So let me pull them up for this. So I'm going to go back to, it'll be easier if you have a visual. So let's share screen again. And for those of you who, yes, it's hard, all the flipping, I really understand. I haven't figured out a better way to do a train the trainer because there are multiple documents and I think it's so important for you to be able to see them. But this session agenda, if I can get to it right here, is something that you can manipulate when you're thinking about the training sessions. And I'll share a document with you at the end that we use when we're training sites or when we were training sites about like training considerations and things to think about. But the big thing is when Andrea and I have done the training over 2 sessions, which I really recommend you do, I think it's a very long training day, especially if you're on Zoom to do all of this. We usually go through module 3. So we do the majority of the adult learning theory and tap in a little bit to digital literacy. And then we usually meet with groups a week later. And that's when we really dig into the digital literacy with module 4 and 5 and session planning. And so the welcome through module 3 is about 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And module 4 through session planning is about 1 hour and 45 minutes. Now I do know a site that did the whole training in one afternoon. It was in person. So that makes a difference. And then we have customized this in different ways. We did a training with Strong City, Baltimore, and they wanted to do it in a way where they had their teachers do a lot of pre-reading so that there were some expectations that they set with the teachers about reading the guide before they came. And then we did a really long session. I think we went through session 4, I'm trying to remember. And then we just got together for about 1 hour to talk about strategies and session planning. So again, it's really flexible, and I will show you that document at the end to help with that. Did that answer the question? Okay. All right, everyone, seatbelts on. Here we go. Got to go back to where we were. Okay, so module 3 is specifically on defining digital literacy, and it's in this chapter when you're doing training that you will really explore the definition of digital literacy and what does it look like in practice. And in this particular definition, you'll see that we've highlighted all the verbs, and so there's a great conversation and there's some suggestions of how you can do that. The other thing that this focuses on, is page 16 to 17 in the guide. So I'm not going to go to page 16 and 17 in the guide, but you might want to be looking at it right now. It's that page that we offer information on what a digitally literate person can do. And we break it down into different types of literacies. so it's a good visual and layout for understanding that and for your own reading. But then we took that, and this is a linking theory to practice. It's number 2. And if you're in the guide and you were to click on that in the guide, you would go to page 62 in the appendix. And there you will see, oh gosh, sorry, again, it's this new mouse. New mouse. Well, I don't know if anyone was at COA, but I had to use the mouse on my new MacBook too, and it was even worse that way. So this document that you're viewing on page 62 is an assessment. It's a digital literacy pre-assessment that you would take. But then you could share it with your learners, and you could do this pre-assessment with them as a conversational piece. Because again, we're recognizing that, especially in the areas of digital literacy, people already feel or may have negative connotations about test taking. And then with digital literacy, there are even feelings of, I might break something, or they're really concerned about what they know about digital literacy. So we certainly don't ever recommend the first time or even the second time you meet them that you're giving them a test. And I'm sure you have your ways of building rapport and doing that. But I love this because this is a 2-page document. It's printable. You can do it, and then you can just sit down and have a conversation with someone, and you're pre-assessing them, but you're building rapport too. And then you can share even how you did on the assessment and some of your strengths around digital literacy. So I wanted to point that out. And then the last thing I want to point out, this was an activity we were going to do, but I don't think we'll have time for it. I think it's going to really eat into questions at the end, so I'm going to skip it. But I want to point out that pages 18 through 26 in the guide are color-coded with a color-coded banner on the side. And they specifically talk about factors that support digital literacy practice. So foundational skills, thinking and processing, feelings and relating, and personal history and experience. And there's some really good tips in there. And so normally what happens, I'm going to give you an exemplar of something we did with another state. But normally what would happen, and when you do the training, is you would assign kind of like a jigsaw reading, a reading, and then you would go into a gallery walk. And so you would have people, you'd give them reading time, and then you would give them time either to gallery walk in person or use a Jamboard to capture their thoughts. And so you'd be asking them to capture, if you look at number 3, key points and resources, and then how they would apply. And then you could circulate and really pull this into a conversation. So we're not, like I said, we're not going to do that activity. We don't have time. But what I'm going to do is I want to show you, this is an actual Jamboard we did with another site. And so you can see that, especially when I get into some of the other ones. Oh, I was thinking this was the one that had the whole bunch of Post-its, but maybe not. This might have been a smaller group. But for example, if I stop at feelings and relating, the green Post-its were what they pulled out of just those 2 pages in the guide about building new skills and learning goals and having brief activities. And, page 22, adult learners with prior negative experiences with technology may experience higher anxiety. But then also on the yellow Post-its, how they would apply that learning. So for your own learning, I really encourage you, here's personal history and experience. You can see, again, this is just a couple pages in the guide, how much you can really pull out of this and how it's very much connected to digital literacy. So that's another activity. And so I hope you're seeing that with the training, even though it's a little bit of a sit and get right now with me for the training materials, that it's very interactive with a lot of options. So we're going to talk about module 4 real briefly, and then we're going to do a whole group activity in module 5. So module 4 is very focused on how to get to know your adult learners and key considerations. And again, oops, I can't show my prints yet. Well, I'll show my prints. This is how it kicks off. So normally what happens in the training is you've been training for a long time. And so we use this scale of Prince, and then we say to people, how are you feeling about teaching digital literacy so far? And they have to pick a number. So we'll do this and I'll say, how are you feeling so far about our digital literacy materials? And let's put your number in the chat. So far, we still have some time. Not all questions have been answered, but how are you feeling so far? We have a 6. Ooh, someone's feeling really good about it so far. Thank you, Allison. We got lots of 7s. Lots of 7s. We have a 4. Someone may still have some questions. We have more 7s. So when you do your training, this is just such a great moment and icebreaker if you're doing it over a couple of hours, because you get here and then you can really have some great conversations about the training. But moving on to the rest of the chapter. This is the chapter that I will say, if you are working with very seasoned adult learners who are very comfortable in these key considerations, you'll have to determine, excuse me, how much time you want to spend on it, because this chapter goes back a little bit to adult learning theory. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and we're going to close out with an activity in chapter 5. And it's in chapter 5 that we introduce 6 evidence-based, research-based strategies that are known to work for working with adults in the context of digital literacy. But by sharing the 6 strategies, we still emphasize that there are a variety of ways to connect with adult learners, and there's no right or wrong way. These are just suggestions. And so what we like to do now, and we're going to do this a little abbreviated, so bear with me so we can do it. But these are the 6 strategies in the page numbers. And normally what you would do is you would go through and you would unpack each one of these, and you would have, just a brief conversation about them. Okay. But for time wise, for our Train the Trainer, we're just getting a little taste. But the big key of this is the learner profiles, because, and we're going to do this right now. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go to that section in the guide. You're not going to be able to do a deep read. I understand that. You would, if you were doing the training, you would give more time. Maybe you'd give like 10 minutes to read. And then when we come back together, we're going to look at the learner profile for Rosa. And the way this activity works is there's a whole group activity. And this is one of my favorite parts of the training, where you whole group read a profile on Rosa. Okay, so we're going to do that together. And then thinking about the strategies in that section you just read, we're going to talk about things we might notice about her as a learner and strategies from the guide that might support her. But then what you're able to do is, depending on your group, you can go back and you can assign Jan and Uba to small groups and send them off in breakout rooms. This training, we haven't done any breakout rooms today, but it's quite interactive that way for small groups as well. And then you have people go off and kind of explore these learner profiles. So are we all up to do a little reading and dig into this section a little bit? Okay, great. So I'm going to go back. Hold on again. You're going to be in your guide on your own, and I'm going to be at this page. So from 34 to 51, I'm going to give you, let's actually do 6 minutes, because what I'd like you to do is I would skim and then maybe pick one section that resonates with you to read if you can. But we are going to do a hard stop at 6 minutes so we can get through the activity and talk about some other things. Any questions? Let me scroll through everyone and check the chat. Are we good with this activity? The link to the tool. Okay, sorry. Yep. Whoever needs the guide, I'm on that. I've lost Andrea. She had to go to a meeting. So you all have to bear with me, because now there we go. I think I sent that to whoever who needed it. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to mute. I'm going to start my timer for 6 minutes, and you're doing a little reading. And feel free while you're reading to turn your camera off as well, if you prefer to do that. Some people had asked for a reshare of the guide, so I just want to let you know, I just popped it back into everyone, and that's the resource guide that we were referring to at the beginning. Okay, so that's about our time for this. So I'm going to have everyone come back together and we're going to talk about Rosa. And so if you were doing this in your training, as I said, you would give a little more time to read, and then whole group, you would go through this activity and then you'd push them into breakout rooms. And so let's do Rosa together. And so I'll model it exactly as we suggest you do in the facilitator training handbook. So we're going to start out, I'm going to read the learning profile for Rosa. So Rosa is a 22-year-old advanced English learner who is working to complete her high school equivalency diploma in English. She has been in the US since she was 16 years old and aspires to work as a nurse. Rosa's speaking and listening in English is very advanced, but she still seems to struggle with reading comprehension. She has disclosed that she was diagnosed with ADHD in high school, but did not receive many services apart from English as a second language classes. She often seems distracted in class and needs things to be repeated. She often offers to model basic skills you've demonstrated, but has frequently missed the explanations and struggles to demonstrate them. She is a very eager and motivated learner and often encourages her classmates, but sometimes expresses a lack of confidence. She is very skilled in using her smartphone, but is intimidated by laptop applications. So when you think about Rosa and think about not yet what strategies you would use with her, but just thinking about her as a learner and what we've talked about, adult learner factors, whole learner, learner variability, what stands out to you about what might motivate her to learn, but also what you need to take into consideration as you work with her. And if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to stop sharing right now for the conversation so I can see you. So let's just have a conversation about her. Or do you need it up? I'm wondering, do you need the slide up? I think it would help. I'm going to share again. Usually I keep the slide up. Let's do that. And it'll be easier for you to pull things out.
So for me, I think her interest in becoming a nurse, which is very much tied to me in the demonstrated desire to help and support other people, that, she wants to encourage classmates and things. And so there's something really tied together there for me that I would want to draw on.
Great insight. What else do we notice about her?
I think also that she's highly motivated and eager. And that's half of the battle, is that she's at the table already and engaged. And so now it's just helping her kind of hone in on a few key things to get to have to build her self-confidence. But the fact that she's so motivated and there, and like Allison saying, just wants to help, that's such a wonderful asset for her and for the program, really.
That's great. And I love how these first two comments are so strengths-based and assets-based. That's so important that we look at them and identify in our learners what those strengths are. What's popping out to you that could be a challenge for her? Again, challenges are okay. We think about the learner variability conversation we just had. What are some things in the challenge area?
Confidence, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe in the back of her mind saying that, when I was in high school, I was diagnosed with ADHD and I never did anything. So maybe that's also plays into her confidence and her struggles.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to show you, this is just what we then highlighted. English learner, nursing, we talked about that. There might be a couple little things that we just didn't pick up on, but we did pick up on eager and motivated to learn. One thing I'll point out that's in here is skilled in using her smartphone. And you probably see this with the learners you use, that they're much more comfortable on technology using their phones. And I'll give you an example. One of the sites that's in our usability study is an adult charter school in DC, the Family Place. And we did a train the trainer. They actually have a dedicated digital literacy person, and I was able to visit in person, which was great. And they did this amazing lesson, and everyone was using their smartphones. And at the end, when we had a conversation with this person about, how'd you design your lesson and what did you do? And she said, from your guide, you talked about a strengths-based approach, and you talked about users being much more connected to their phones with technology. And usually I grab the laptop card and they're on computers or tablets, but I decided to teach the lesson this way. So there's a lot to be said for that. So thinking about that and the brief reading you did of the strategies, is there anything that you read in that section with the 6 different strategies that pops out to you and you're going, oh, I could use that strategy with Rosa to support her as a learner? And feel free to share if something comes to mind. Or if you didn't have time to kind of read through strategies that you just already have in your toolbox.
I think that setting and monitoring goals would be an important thing for Rosa, because she has sometimes expressed a lack of confidence, and also because she has sort of those specific areas where she needs help with. I think creating those measurable goals for her and working with her to show that she can progress and she is progressing would be really important for her motivation.
I love that. That's a great strategy and piece to have pulled out of that. Thank you. Anything else? I think, Ruthie, did you just share something? Because you were muted, I think. Okay, no. Okay. All right. Can we get one more strategy to support her?
I think I would do a little bit of research around how to support people in learning environments with ADHD and help her develop some tools to retain information better, whether that's like specifically teaching skills on note-taking or flashcards or whatever works for her, maybe helping her just develop those study habits. So if she does go on to nursing school, she's kind of set up for success and, in her current learning environment.
That's great. I think that's another great strategy to employ. Thank you, everyone. And so then the last part of this activity is these are strategies that we pulled out. And so then you could then have a conversation about that, empathy in interviews and how to build computer skills and community of practice and accessibility strategies, which is what we just touched on at the end of that conversation. So after you do this whole group, you then go through and you assign, and you can do this as a pair share, you can do this as a breakout room, and then there's a slide for Jan, there's a slide for Uba. The strategy slides don't exist because you will create those through conversation. And then we won't do prints again, but then when you end, like you really at this point, you've hit the heavy chapter on digital literacy and you've gone through all the training modules. And so the training closes out after the pause and reflect on session planning. And so we don't have a lot of slides in this section because what we do is we encourage you to pull the documents from the training materials. And I do have those, and I'm going to have to make a note when I send everything to Patrick. The session templates that I showed you in the facilitator training guide, we have those in a separate PDF. So it's easy if you have to do a virtual training to just drop those pages. And then we also have in a separate little PDF that I'll share because it's going to make it easier for your training. Let me go back. We have these, oh, the darn mouse. We have these directions and we have the other learner profiles so that you can drop that link and send people off to breakout rooms. So going back to session planning, we offer some activities around that, and then a pause and reflect, and then a final reflection. And that's the training in a whole. That's the training materials. But I'm going to show you one more thing really quickly before we open it up to questions, and bear with me as I move this strange Zoom thing again that will not go away. I want to show you, and I think it is right here. So this is the deck we were just using. with the talking points. And then of course you have the facilitator training handbook. And then the other thing, if this would be helpful, I can share it. This goes back to the question of how might you customize your training, and you're all coming from different sites. This is a training scope and plan that we used with sites for the usability study, but I'm happy to share it. It provides the description for each learning module, and it really helped sites kind of determine how they wanted to structure their training. And then this on the very end, kind of these questions to take people through. So what I'd like to do is I'm gonna stop sharing, and I just really want to open it up to any questions, anything you still have confusion about, questions on how we do training, anything like that.
I have a quick question for you, Pam. Why others are thinking too. In your usability study and just in your different trainings, have you seen a lot of programs implement this across all of their volunteer tutors or mentors or teachers, or really kind of hone in on, you know, even some tutors or volunteers that are more digital literate themselves? You know, I guess kind of have you seen kind of the model? I'm just thinking from a implementation standpoint, you know, is that easy to, have you seen more programs kind of embed this throughout their existing volunteer training, or maybe do more cohort specific even for their volunteers?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, we did do a train the trainer with I'm gonna say it wrong. Literacy Center of West Michigan. Am I saying it right? And they're about to get our surveys. I know that they came to the train the trainer, and then they were going to kind of explore how to do that. So I can share and follow up. I'm gonna share again with that question. I'm gonna share the deck that I just presented at COABE, because this is the usability section. And so I think it might help with that. So these are the types of sites we've trained, a total of 10. So we've trained the traditional sites for the professional development. In the model you're talking about, I think it's really hard because, you know, what I have found in talking to sites that have tutoring and mentoring programs is they have a very structured training program in place already. So what I would probably do is go into the guide and determine, and I love this kind of stuff. I miss this kind of stuff. So I'd be happy to work with anyone on the call who's thinking of doing this, but you'd have to do a crosswalk between your current training and the guide and determine where you could embed it. However, I will say, because this is so digital literacy focused, you know, is there a way with current tutors and mentors to just do this training with them and then determine how you would do it with new people? And because I brought this up, I'm just going to show you. So we did a training with Literacy New York, but this is the class that I was talking about. You have a couple images. And then this is in Irving, Texas. They actually pulled a full PowerPoint lesson from the guide and from the learner variability model. This student was really neat because he not only did his presentation, they had to pick a topic that was interesting to them, but he sold his business. He has a business, and he was like, and if you need this detailing, this is how you can contact me. So you have to love those opportunities. So I'm not sure I answered your question, Patrick. Did I? But think about it a little bit.
It was kind of an open-ended rhetorical on my part too.
Okay.
You gave some great suggestions, and I just raised it up because many of the people on the call I've had conversations with about, right? They're all kind of looking at how to leverage their existing, you know, resources and to see what they can do further. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you have a scope and sequence already in place, you very easily could pull from it or add it, or you might be thinking right now, oh geez, you know, that learner variability, that's a really neat tool. It's going to replace this other lesson that we do that's not as impactful. Yeah. Other questions?
Would you suggest that this is best delivered online, you know, virtually or in person, or is it up to each, you know, organization?
It's up to each organization. I will tell you, it's interesting, even though I deliver this virtually, we wrote it for in person with the backup digital. You know how for a while we were writing everything digital, but then we would tell people, well, if you're in person, you can do it this way. But we intentionally wrote it, gallery walk, but you can do a gallery walk with a Jamboard. So either way, I mean, it's funny, when I went to COABE, I did a different type of train the trainer there with this material. And it was the first time I had done it in person. And so we did the gallery walk in person. It's whatever works best for the people you're working with.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Obviously, I haven't read it all yet, but it strikes me that the guide itself we could almost like share that with our tutors and let them do it like a book club where we're not actually leading anything, but let them get together and talk about one chapter of the guide every week, and they do it like a book club. And I think they could get a lot out of it even without being staff led, and that would be an opportunity for, I think, more people to get the information more quickly than if they had to sign up for a training that we planned.
I think that's a really great way to do something like this. Where I taught, we used to do that, where we would read as a staff, we would read a book.
Yeah.
And every staff meeting we would be discussing it. If you do that, I would suggest that you encourage them to do the pause and reflects. I would maybe have a 1-pager for each chapter, and then maybe every few chapters you get together and you do some of the bigger activities. Yeah. Anything else? Because I see some people popping up, we can keep talking, but I just popped a couple questions. And if you could give me this information, and I'm going to try and jot it down on a Post-it. So we have to track, and we want to track distribution and whatnot. So what I'd like to know, if you could just give me a number 1 and number 2. So as a result of this training, how many are you going to go off and train? So just you on your own. Are you going off to train 10 volunteers, or over the next year, will you end up training 50 volunteers, or through the book club? Like, how many will you impact that way? And then how many learners? And it can be a rough estimate. We're not going to hold you to any numbers, but if you could just populate that. We like to always share who we've trained and kind of what that looks like. So that would be helpful. So while people are doing that, Patrick, I know you wanted to ask some questions as well. So
Sure. Just for the group, I'll raise up that, this is kind of a new partnership for us. And I so appreciate Pam and I have had lots of conversations about exploring this partnership going forward. And then I just wanted to see if there was a possibility, or if people are interested in just continued work in the space, whether that's having Pam come and do even more with us, or if it's going forward and developing and checking back in a few months if that implementation is there. I just think that's something that I wanted to raise up to everyone. I always think cohorts are important and strategies to share, but I also recognize that it can become another meeting. And so appreciate any feedback on that.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I think for us, we're a literacy center that runs primarily on volunteer, operations, that the short-term, difficulty of like attending these trainings and getting it all together is like so far like outwon by the long-term gains of training up our volunteer base and making a greater impact long term. So I think we would definitely be interested in ongoing support with this group.
Just to follow up on that suggestion, whether we were involved or not, we actually don't usually do trainings. We kind of got involved in this because of the guide, but it was great for me because I used to teach, so I really enjoyed it. But one of our sites is Intel, and we're working with a site in California, specifically with corporate volunteers. And so we provide technical assistance in the form of a cohort that we have these optional technical drop-ins. And so, we went through the guide really quickly today. So maybe reading the first few chapters and going through the training material, and then this group getting back together in a couple months to talk about it. I'm jotting down everyone's numbers. So if you haven't put your numbers in yet, please do. Again, you're not held to anything, and it can be a very rough estimate. Okay, well, I just want to say, and when you're a teacher, you're never supposed to have favorites, but you're my only group that has had their camera on the whole time, and you've been so engaging. And I did want to say, Andrea got some screenshots before she popped off. Are you okay with us using those in social media? Like if we do a post that we trained in Michigan or presentations? I don't know, Patrick, would we need to have releases for that? Usually we don't in a Zoom, but I guess if anyone has a concern, email Patrick with like the next 24 hours or whatnot. But it's been really great. I wish we could have done a full training, and I hope I didn't give you too much whiplash going between all the resources. So
we appreciate you so much, Pam. And yes, on our end, we often also do the same thing and share out. So if anyone has any concerns about pictures or anything, let me know. You can shoot me an email about that, and I'll let Pam know. And we will be sure to share all the information. And it sounds like we'd like to have continued dialogue about this topic of this resource. And so I'll be in touch as well with all of you kind of as a follow-up to see where we might go next with that. But I just really appreciate you, Pam, taking the time. And it's just such a great tool and resource. And I think one of the things that we're really trying to hone in is not recreating the wheel and really leveraging what's already out there and best tried and true practices. And in literacy, it's so hard. There's so many resources out there, and it's really just trying to find the time, set aside the time, like Caitlin said, to make sure that what we're using is of quality and of value. And you've already done all that. So that's really kind of the genesis of why we wanted to bring this forward. So, oh, I see, Allison, you had your hand raised too.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And thank you, Pam. Absolutely. Super helpful. Appreciate it. Appreciate you organizing this, Patrick. I threw my email in the chat. Washtenaw Literacy is a bigger, not that we're huge, but we're a bigger literacy organization. If you contact me and let me know if you're interested, when we plan anything for our tutors, we'll invite your tutors if you want. So just send me an email and I'll just put you on a distro list. And if we do a book club or a training or whatever we're going to do with this, we'll invite your folks to join us if you wish.
great. And I love how people are sharing their emails. So I can't capture them all that quickly. So Patrick, if I could get the list from you after, that would be great. We have talked, so separate from this, we have talked a little bit about possibly focusing and doing some work in Michigan. And so perhaps it would work out for me to come out this fall. We'll have to see. But thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Patrick, I'll send everything off to you that you can share with them. And it's really been a delight. So I appreciate your attention and your energy.
Thank you all so much. Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.